Assalamualaikum and good evening to all to our lovely lecturer, Professor Dr. Muhammad Aziz Shah bin Muhammad Arif, and to all of my friends. Today, I would like to present the new chapters of for delinquency, which is about history of juvenile justice in America. So, in our presentation, we will be explained in dual language, which is Malay and English. So you guys can refer the delinquency book chapter 2 for more information and for more completed. And in my presentation, it will be short and more easy to you guys understand. Before we start, before we start, we want to introduce ourselves. My name is Muhammad Akhyuddin bin Abdul Rahman, and my friend's name is Muhammad Aiman bin Wang. For introduction, juvenile delinquency is a recent concept. In Willie Sanders' information books, Juvenile Offender for 1,000 Years clearly indicate that juvenile were substance involved in criminal activity long before the word delinquency were used to describe it. English law in the 7th and 8th century identified the criminal penalties committed by children as young as 10 or 11 years old. Other figure, Neil Postman, argue that age 7 was selected as the age of criminal responsibility because during the middle age, reading and written instruction were not available for the people. John Sutton present interesting persuasive data that deviant children were thought of as stubborn. According to Sutton analysis, first stubborn child law was passed in Massachusetts in 1646, and laws such as this heavily influenced by Puritan religious concept. Puritan religious were stressed the importance of family and the requirement that child follow the order and command of their parents. And the penalty come directly from the book of Deuteronomy of Bible. One interesting facet of this law was the parents who were disobeyed were not to exact the death penalty themselves, but instead were to bring child directly to court official, then carry out the death penalty. So by the 17th century, society view, especially in Europe, were changing with respect to children. Instead of being viewed as miniature adults, to speak, children were beginning to seen as young innocent, and their moral and spiritual development become matters of concern and importance of adults and leaders. Sexual modesty was become the norm of juvenile, and children were considered weak and need of guidance and adult supervision. Neil Postman suggests that childhood as an age of innocence and lack of criminal responsibility. However, in the middle 15th century, the practice of teaching and instructing youth with the written word began to spread. One result of this new method of learning and communication was to extend the age of childhood beyond 7 and into what is now known as adolescence. Several principles concern child to be emerged, and these principles were enunciated by religious authorities. First, children were not to be left unattended, but always to be under adult supervision. Second, children were not to be pampered or spoiled, but were to be subjected to strong discipline in what would seem to be holdover from previous view of young people. Third, children were to be treated with modesty and not subjected to nudity and lewd behavior, including poor language, especially from adults. Fourth, proper language and dress and everyday manners were to be instilled in youth and adults, especially parents, were to be continually treated with respect. Okay, next, 19th century reform and efforts and practice. Some historians contend that English laws, along with the other traditional English legal, particularly the doctrine of parens patriae, were adopted almost wholly by the American colonists. Gradually, the notion of nurturance and special care and supervision began to appear in Europe and in countries of United States. One specific illustration of this emerged concept was the establishment of a special house of refuge in New York City in 1825. Within the next 3 years, similar house of refuge were established in Boston and Philadelphia. These three houses of refuge dominate juvenile correction and treatment for 25 years in United States. House of refuge were urban established to be sure, and their purpose was to reclaim the life of youngsters who were roaming the street of metropolitan city or who had been referred by the court. The minority youth who populate this institution were thus not migrate from rural areas but immigrate from other countries. Black youth, for example, were typical keep out of the first house of refuge. As an example of the racial policies of early house of refuge, in 1849, Philadelphia established a house of refuge for colored juvenile delinquents. House of refuge were designed to prevent youth from becoming involved in criminal activity or from becoming more criminal in their behavior. Okay, daripada rumah pelindungan ni, okay, dia dibina untuk mengelakkan anak muda ni terjebak dengan aktiviti jenayah. And daripada aktiviti jenayah tu menjadikan dia lebih bersikap jenayah, become more criminal in their behavior. Okay. So prevention become a key watchword for the administrator and supporter of this institution. Because of parent patriae, many of the parents and guardians of this youth were not fully involved in their placement. One of the most far-reaching cases involved house of refuge was ex parte cross heard by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in 1838. So you guys can look at the book lah. Saya lihat kat buku. Okay. Semua information ni ada kat buku. In the 1840 and 1850, Children Aid Society and other philanthropic organizations began to develop and flourish in the country major cities such as Boston, Chicago, New York, and Philadelphia. The most far-reaching of this organization in terms of program affecting juvenile welfare was the Children Aid Society, formed in New York City in 1853 by Charles Loring Breese. Breese was a social reformer who public display a philanthropic interest in the welfare of poor and homeless youth and professed a deep faith in Christianity. and potential salvation of mankind is in general. He also demonstrates a disdainful attitude towards some children as well as toward the parents of poor and destitute children. As Grossberg aptly put it, Brace was as much in fear of these children as he was in fear for them. Charles Loring Brace and his Children Aid Society accounted for shipment of more than 150,000 youth from the street of New York to rural family in the West. So, next we go to jangka masa panjang bagi institut Juvenile, long-term juvenile institution. In the middle of the Active 50, new type of institution were called by many names, but mostly they were known as reformatories, training school, or industrial school. The earliest reformation were developed using private and public funds. The first reformation was established in Massachusetts in 1846 at a facility named the Lyman School for Boys. The first public female reformatory was established in 1855, also in Massachusetts. Massachusetts. Tak tahu sebutan dia macam mana. Massachusetts. This first female institution also introduced the cottage system. Cottage system ni dia seakan-akan pondok. Sistem pondok. Okay, sistem pondok. Which soon become a popular model for juvenile reformatories in the United States. The cottage system is still evident today, although one of several types of juvenile institution design and model. Walaupun dia nama dia macam rumah pondok, tapi dia punya sistem dia one of several types of juvenile institution design and model masih ada bercirikan reformation punya sistem. And the cottage system reflected correction thinking in the middle of 19th century, thinking that placed the strength of the family at the center of troubled youth. It was assumed by many that reinserting a strong family present the life of the youngster. Their attitude and habit may be turned from criminal pursuit to conventional thinking and behavior. Okay, daripada pemikiran yang bercelaru kepada pemikiran dan tingkah laku yang lebih konvensional. Despite the lack of evidence concerning the effectiveness of this model, cottage system, the popularity of reformatories seems to grow throughout the rest of 19th century. So maksudnya sistem rumah pondok ni tidaklah begitu popular dan kurang bukti yang mengesahkan ini ada keberkesanan. Jadinya popularity of reformatories lagi cepat mengembang berbanding yang lain pada zaman ke-19. According to the census by 1890, the number of institutional reformatories increased to 58 from 53, and the numbers of inmates, number of orang yang duduk dalam institution tu daripada 11,468 to 14,486. While juvenile reformatories handle all kinds of juvenile offenders, John Sutton makes the case that lawmakers in 19th century definitely intended juvenile institution to handle incorrigible youth, that is juvenile who were considered beyond control. Okay, beyond control tu perangai yang luar kawalan. Often the architecture structure of the institution indicate its intended purpose. For example, contohnya fasiliti yang dibina yang dibina untuk rumah reformatoris dibina dengan dinding yang kukuh dan yang tinggi, plenty of secure lock, okay, kunci yang ataupun apa, tempatnya sangat dijaga, dan can be assumed that the intended purpose of such a place to prevent inmate from leaving. Okay, mengelakkan daripada institusi ni, orang yang duduk dalam institusi ni keluar bebas. In addition, if these facilities have large population, it can be assumed that individual attention is not a primary focus. Almost all reformatories and juvenile institutions established in the 19th century, including House of Refuge, were thought to have treatment and education function, despite their imposing structure and the presence of rigid schedule and sometimes harsh discipline and punishment given to their inmates. Ada satu masa tu Children Aid Society tu ditolak oleh orang Amerika disebabkan pengasasnya Charles Loring Brace adalah orang yang beragama Kristian, dan dia menyebarkan apa, dia punya tempat tu adalah agama yang lain. And then seorang pengasas sesuatu agama tu menolak Brace ni kerana dia beranggapan bahawa Brace ni memperluaskan agamanya. Okay, agama Puritan tu. Okay, dia punya ketua agama Puritan tu menolak yang bahawa Brace tu menyebarkan agama di samping dia membuat persatuan bantuan ni. Ketika perang saudara, during the Civil War, juvenile institution will receive more youth. Okay, juvenile institution ni menerima lebih banyak orang muda berbanding orang tua, disebabkan orang tua akan dihantar untuk berperang. So, institution ni akan riliskan their older inmates to make room for new ones. Okay, untuk diberi orang muda tu masuk. However, major reform in matter pertaining to juvenile seems to be put on hold during the Civil War. Dan undang-undang juvenile ni masih lagi tergantung disebabkan ada perang saudara. Okay, that's all from me. Next, I pass to Aiman for the next subtopic.
Hai, Assalamualaikum semua. Okay, we go to the next topic. Semua masih ada lagi ke? Everyone still here to hear my presentation?
Ada.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Okay, everyone is okay if I am speaking in English?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure. No problem, Aiman. No
Okay,
problem.
okay.
Of
I
course.
understand.
Ellen, are you here, Ellen?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. For the first, let me present in Malay, I think, to make sure my classmate is not sleeping along my presentation kan. Okay. So after I present to my slide to our classmate, and then I will present to you
All
after
right.
that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mantap. Okay, perkembangan akhir abad ke-19. Dengarlah semua. Okey, selepas Perang Saudara, peristiwa mengenai reformasi keadilan Juvenile berterusan berlaku. Sebagai contoh, Full House telah ditubuhkan pada tahun 1889 di Chicago, New West Side sebagai tempat untuk anak-anak miskin dan pendatang serta keluarga mereka, mewujudkan hubungan sosial dan hubungan kepada masyarakat serta menjadi 20 sejarah keadilan Juvenile di Amerika. Maksudnya, Astaghfirullahalazim. Astaghfirullahalazim. Mohon yang chat saya tu boleh berhenti dulu ya. Saya nak present ni. Okey. Maksudnya kat sini pada awal tu ada perang saudara. Lepas tu hasil daripada perang saudara tu ditubuhkan Hull House. Sebab apa? Sebab dia nak selamatkan kanak-kanak miskin dan pendatang daripada keluarga yang tidak mendapatkan kebajikan yang sepatutnya pada ketika itu. Maka ditubuhkanlah Hull House ni. Okey, faham? Okey. Ellen, can you understand what I'm talking about?
No.
No, okay. Of course that you don't understand because I speak in Malay. Okay. In English, Hull House was established in 1089. I don't know how to spell it, in Chicago near the West Side, as a place for poor children and immigrant and their families, establishing social and economic ties to society as well as being 20 history of juvenile justice in America. Okay, can you understand?
Aiman,
Okay, it's good.
ada bunyi Terengganu sikit tu.
Ya ke? Ya Allah, biasalah tu English. Okay, kita sambung lagi. Okay, sebelum 1869, Mahkamah Massachusetts menggunakan percubaan sebagai elemen dalam mengendalikan pesalah Juvenile pada tahun 1870. Ya Allah, macam mana nak silent laptop ni Mahkamah Agung Illinois mengeluarkan keputusan yang akan mempunyai kesan berkekalan terhadap keadilan Juvenile dan pembaharuan Juvenile. Okey, maksudnya Hull House tu, maka adanya satu mahkamah di Massachusetts tu yang mengendalikan pesalah-pesalah Juvenile hasil daripada Hull House tu. Asal-asalnya Hull House ni niat dia baik, tapi disebabkan terkumpulnya orang pelajar-pelajar kat sana, maka mahkamah di Massachusetts ni dia ingin mengendalikan kes-kes Juvenile tu. Okay, in Englishnya dia it was to say here that before lah 1869, courts in Massachusetts use probation as an element in handling juvenile offenders. Maksudnya kat sini courts kat situ dia handle masalah juvenile yang berlaku di sana pada ketika itu. Okey. Sesetengah merujuk kepada program dan dasar pasca Perang Saudara ini sebagai gerakan menyelamatkan kanak-kanak, dan mereka yang menyokongnya sebagai penyelamat kanak-kanak. Pada asasnya pembaharuan ini diterajui oleh ramai wanita dermawan. Hampir kesemuanya berkaitan dengan kedudukan, kekayaan dan pengaruh di bandar dan negeri tempat mereka tinggal. Maksudnya asas setengahnya mewujudkan pertubuhan full house ataupun dasar pasca perang saudara ni adalah sebagai gerakan untuk menyelamatkan kanak-kanak yang telah ditubuhkan suatu ketika dahulu, yang mana pasca perang saudara ni untuk menyelamatkan kanak-kanak ni telah mendapat sokongan yang hebat daripada ramai wanita dermawan pada ketika itu. Yang mana mereka semua ketika itu adalah untuk apa? Untuk mendapatkan kekayaan, pengaruh di bandar dan negeri tempat mereka tinggal. Begitu. Sama ada satu lagi kat bawah tu. Cuba back balik. Okay, the most social commentators suggest that a combination of several socio-economic factors contribute to the development of juvenile justice system in 19th century. In particular, three conditions are often identified. That means is most commentators say that socio-economy become the most factors that contribute to the development of the juvenile. Faham tak? Faham kan? Maksudnya ramai pengulas-pengulas sosial pada ketika itu yang mengatakan bahawa masalah socio-ekonomi menjadi suatu faktor terbesar terhadap perkembangan masalah juvenile lah pada pada abad ke-19 itu. Okey. Khususnya tiga keadaan, almost three aspek, iaitu perindustrian, industri, pembandaran dan immigration. Dan sebagai negara perindustrian, sistem kerjanya beralih daripada hasil pertanian. That means almost the family at that time was change their house. Maksudnya dia berpindah randah lah kan. Dia berpindah randah menyebabkan hasil daripada perpindahan keluarga-keluarga tersebut menyebabkan menjadi suatu faktor kepada berkembangnya masalah juvenile, keadilan juvenile pada tahun 18 lah, pada abad ke-19 pada ketika itu. Okay, next. Faham tak? Faham ke tak faham? Ke saya melalut seorang-seorang je?
Faham.
Terus? Faham. Okay, tak apalah kalau tak faham.
Faham lah Aiman, faham.
Faham. Boleh.
Oh, bagusnya. Orang Kelantan memang bagus. Okay. Seterusnya adalah undang-undang kenakalan pertama dan penubuhan mahkamah juvenile. Okay. One of the goals of child rescue to create separate set of laws governing young offenders. Maksudnya the first matlamat dia adalah untuk mewujudkan satu set undang-undang berasingan yang mengawal pesalah muda. Maksudnya the first matlamat dia yang dia nak buat pada ketika itu adalah they want to create another split set of law. Maksudnya satu set undang-undang yang berasingan daripada pesalah-pesalah dewasa dengan pesalah-pesalah muda pada ketika itu. Okey, akhirnya usaha menyelamat kanak-kanak menghasilkan penciptaan undang-undang kenakalan pertama dan mahkamah juvenile yang sepadan pada 1 Julai 1899. Okey. So after that finally child rescue of effort tu resulted in the creation of the first delinquency law and corresponding juvenile court in 1 July. 1899. Okey, maksudnya hasil daripada wujudnya set asing undang-undang tu, maka terwujudlah satu penyertaan undang-undang kenakalan pertama dan Mahkamah Juvenile yang sepadan pada 1 Julai itu. Okey, undang-undang kenakalan pertama ini yang dikenali sebagai suatu akta untuk rawatan dan kawalan kanak-kanak tanggungan, terabai dan delinkuen, menetapkan umur 16 tahun sebagai bidang kuasa umur Mahkamah Juvenile, tetapi umur itu kemudian dinaikkan kepada 17 untuk kanak-kanak lelaki dan 18 untuk kanak-kanak perempuan. Maksudnya the first dia punya rate umur tu adalah 16 dan 16 tahun untuk pesalah juvenile. Tetapi dia telah berubah balik dan dia naikkan umur tersebut daripada 17 untuk kanak-kanak lelaki dan 18 untuk kanak-kanak perempuan. Okay. So fungsi Mahkamah Juvenile ni yang baru ditubuhkan adalah jelas dikenal pasti di Chicago dengan penciptaan sekolah ibu bapa yang digunakan dalam hubungan dengan mahkamah. Salah satu fungsi juvenile pertama mahkamah adalah untuk memaksa ponteng dan juvenile yang degil. Sini ada typo sikit kot. Maksudnya student yang ponteng atau juvenile yang lain yang degil ke dalam beberapa jenis program pendidikan. Maksudnya daripada dulu pun diorang dah ada satu sekolah diorang sendiri untuk handle that kind of juvenile pada ketika itu kan. Dengan nama sekolah dia sekolah ibu bapa. Dengan adanya sekolah tu maka mereka bagilah a type of educational program to dia juvenile pada ketika itu. So that was I want to say here that after the established juvenile court was clearly identified in Chicago with the creation of the parent school used in connection with the court. One is the court is the first juvenile function. The first function that want to create is to force keeping and other stubborn juvenile into the type of educational program. Maksudnya itu dah dia kumpul semua pesalah-pesalah juvenile di sekolah itu, kemudian dia orang memberikan beberapa program pendidikan pada pesalah-pesalah tersebut, pada penghuni-penghuni tersebut. Dalam masa yang sama mereka ni menjaga kebajikan penghuni tersebut. Okey, walau bagaimanapun pada bahagian akhir abad ke-19 sekolah industri telah diwujudkan dan pada tahun 1882 satu cabaran kepada kuasa institusi sedemikian untuk menempatkan kanak-kanak malang. Apa tu? Mahkamah Agung memutuskan bahawa sekolah industri lebih banyak daripada sekolah penjara. Mungkin alasan seperti ini mendorong para reformasi untuk meneruskan tanggapan bahawa keadilan juvenile harus tertumpu kepada pendidikan berbanding hukuman. Maksudnya apabila timbulnya suatu dia nak buat kemajuan pada ketika itu kan, maka adanya sekolah industri pada abad ke-19 itu banyak tumbuh, banyak ditubuhkan sekolah industri itu. Kemudian mereka ni mendatangkan suatu anggapan kepada para reformasi bahawa education tu is more important rather than punishment lah. Faham tak? Maksudnya hasil daripada pertumbuhan sekolah industri tu, maka mereka meletakkan bahawa that the juvenile justice system should focus on education rather than punishment. Maksudnya dia nak cakap kat sini yang student-student sekarang yang juvenile ni mereka perlukan pendidikan, bukan that kind of punishment yang perlu diberikan pada mereka. Okay, next. Ada lagi ke? Okay, walau bagaimanapun, pada akhir abad ke-19 sekolah industri telah diwujudkan. Oh, ni dah ada tadi. Satu lagi ciri-ciri undang-undang kenakalan baru di Chicago ialah penekanan pada rawatan psikologi dan sekretari. Walau bagaimanapun, undang-undang kenakalan pertama 25 tumpuan Mahkamah Pertama terhadap pendidikan dan rawatan psikologi jelas memberi kesan bahawa mahkamah adalah sebuah institusi yang melampaui batas memberikan hukuman kepada kesalahan jenayah di kalangan juvenile. Maksudnya kat sini that series another features of the new delinquency law in Chicago is the emphasis on psychology and psychiatric treatment. However, the first delinquency law 25 the focus of the first juvenile courts in psychological education and treatment clearly signal of the courts is an situation that goes beyond the limit of giving punishment to criminal offence among the juvenile. That means a lot of juvenile at that time get the punishment from the court until that government at this time want to create the law of institution for the psychological and psychiatric treatment. Okay, next. Okay, lepas tu pada perkembangan awal abad ke-20, isu yang sering dibangkitkan adalah isu perkauman yang terdapat di kebanyakan mahkamah. Sebagai contoh, kulit hitam sering ditugaskan untuk menjadi pegawai percubaan. Maksudnya the issue that are often raised are related to racial issue that found the most court. Example that black men are often assigned to be a probation officer. Maksudnya waktu perkembangan abad ke-20 tu, mereka sudah nak menaikkan lagi mahkamah juwana tu kan. Jadi mereka merendahkan bangsa kulit hitam ni untuk apa? Untuk jadi to being a probation officer, sebagai pegawai percubaan. However, yang berkulit putih tu, the white man, dia jadi pegawai atasan. Okay. Pada tahun 1912, Biro Kanak-Kanak Amerika Syarikat telah ditubuhkan sebagai organisasi pengawasan untuk mengumpul data dan menyiasat tuduhan penderaan dan salah urus antara mahkamah dan institusi juwana negara. That's mean in 1912 the US Bureau of Children was established as a surveillance. Surveillance tu is keadilan keadilan organisation to collect data and investigate allegation of abuse and mismanagement. Maksudnya pada ketika itu dia nak menyiasatlah terhadap beberapa tuduhan penderaan dan salah urus terhadap organisasi pengawasan yang menguruskan juvenile pada ketika itu. So siapa yang handle? Yang handle adalah Bureau of Children, Biro Kanak-Kanak Amerika Syarikat pada ketika itu. Dengan pengawasan yang ditawarkan oleh mahkamah dan Biro Kanak-Kanak, pihak sistem keadilan juvenile yang baru muncul, terutamanya mahkamah dan mereka sekolah dan klinik attendant dibiarkan untuk memetakan laluan dan hala tuju mereka sebagai sebahagian besar separuh pertama abad ke-20. Maka dia nak cakap kat sini hasil daripada pengawasan yang ditawarkan oleh mahkamah dan biro kanak-kanak itu, maka tertubuhnya lah beberapa sekolah dan klinik attendant untuk juvenile punya pesalah lah kan. Dan sebagai ahli-ahli biro kanak-kanak Amerika Syarikat telah menulis laporan dan menjalankan penyiasatan terhadap operasi mahkamah Juvenile, klinik dan institusi di seluruh tanah air mereka pada ketika itu, dan sistem baru keadilan Juvenile semakin kukuh di negara ini dan kuasa asasnya tidak dicabar secara serius selama beberapa dekad. Kalau ikutkan pembentangan untuk second session ni is quite boring lah, sebab dia more kepada history of juvenile justice system. So I'm and my group mate just cakap apa, cerita je lah berkaitan dengan perkembangannya daripada abad ke-19 dan abad ke-20. Macam itu. Ada lagi ke Nakib? Sudah je. So that's all for today. For Ellen, after that presentation, we will give to you PDF for you lah to read about the delinquency. Okay. So after the class, you can refer PDF about delinquency, and then any question if that you have, you can ask me after the class or another student. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we go to the next session. Is a question. I think Nak, you can continue for the next session.
Thank you, Aiman, for the explaining. We have 3 questions that you can answer. The easy question. So first, what is 4 principles that concerning children seems to be emerged, and often these principles were initiated by religious authorities? This answer, before this I have explained it. So anyone, can you try it? Okay, jawapan dia ada kat buku. Okay, bermula daripada ayat several principles concerning children seems to be emerged, and often these principles were initiated by religious authorities. First, so you can try.
Saya nak cuba soalan yang pertama.
Okay, Zikri.
Okay, what is 4 principles that concerning children seems to be emerging? Okay, jawapannya adalah yang pertama, seorang kanak-kanak itu tidak boleh dibiarkan tanpa sebarang pengawasan. Dia perlulah dijaga oleh orang dewasa lah. Yang kedua, seorang kanak-kanak tidak boleh terlalu dimanjakan. Sebaliknya mereka ini perlu dikenakan satu tindakan disiplin yang kuat. Okey, yang ketiga, seorang kanak-kanak juga tidak boleh dilayan ataupun dijadikan sebagai sesuatu simbol nudity ataupun perkara-perkara yang tidak senonoh. Sebaliknya mereka perlu diajar ataupun dilayan secara dengan penuh nilai-nilai murni. Yang keempat dan yang terakhir, pemakaian yang elok ataupun yang beretika lah, orang kata senang kan, dan penggunaan bahasa juga yang elok juga perlu diterapkan kepada kanak-kanak ini.
Yes, true. That answer is true. So next we move on to second question. Where and what years is House of Refuge established, and where the next place that built the same concept? Jawapan yang senang juga. Okay. Dah terangkan tadi, bentangan tadi.
Boleh try kah?
Boleh.
Can I try? Where and what year is House of Refuge established and where the next place that built the same concept? Where? The New York City in 1825. Right.
Yes. So,
So
next.
the next place that build the same concept is at the Boston and Philadelphia.
Yes. True. Thank you, Golly. Very good answer. Mantap. Okay, mantap. Okay, so next, the third question. Why socioeconomy is said to be a contributor to juvenile activity? Ini telah diterangkan oleh Aiman tadi. So, anyone can try? Huaida? Tak nak try Huaida? Padam terus muka. Laju betul Ini part Aiman. Dah dibentangkan. Bahagian Aiman. Why socioeconomy is said to be contributed to juvenile activity. Ada siapa-siapa nak try? Anyone can try to answer it?
Ini part mana?
Aiman. Part lepas sampai. Yes.
Can the answer not be in the book, like we have our own answer? It doesn't mean that we have to use the book to answer the last question. Boleh ke? Kalau cari jawapan sendiri yang kita.
Okay. Try.
Of course you can, because the answer is not only true or false. It's just like a kind of opinion, I think. So it's just your opinion.
Okay.
In my opinion, socioeconomics is said to be a contributor to juvenile activity because the poor, like the poor children or like a poor family, they cannot afford their children to go to school or to get an education. So they are more orang kata terdedah. They are open to like juvenile activity like stealing or apa ni? Macam tu lah, yang mencuri, bergaduh, fighting and so on and so forth.
Okay. So I don't know the answer, but we will see the real answer. So the answer for first and second, I know the answer is true. That our friends that answer it. So the third question, okay, you guys can see it and I will ulang lah. As an industrial country, its system of work shifting from agriculture product to more mechanical and manufacturing job, which in turn lead to greater employment of population movement to the city. This population shift coupled with the movement of immigration against most often to the big city of the country is trying. All these factors are considered to also contribute to the breakdown of supervision and control owned by families, especially parents. So jawapan Syahada tu kena tanya Aiman. Adakah betul ke tak? Aiman, betul ke jawapan Syahada?
It's quite true lah, because that what she said is have in the answer.
Similar lah.
Similar lah.
Yeah.
It's quite similar lah, but she try the best. Okay. I so appreciate.
Yeah,
Okay, that's all.
Good answer too. Okay. So next is, so any question that you have about the history of juvenile justice in America? Apa-apa masalah yang korang hadapi korang ada terdengar bahasa Jawa ke, bahasa Terengganu ke daripada bahasa Inggeris tu? Okay.
Saya mau tanya soalan.
Okay. Yes, yes. Yeah.
Ni saya nampak tadi yang saya baca lah. Ada kan first perkenalan kena undang-undang tu umur 16 tahun kan? Kan?
Umur pada mulanya
16 tahun kan. Lepas tu change 17 untuk lelaki, 18 for girls.
ni
Kan?
bahagian siapa? Bahagian Aiman ke bahagian
Lelaki
saya?
rasanya.
Ya, lelaki.
Bila saya baca, okay. Pada
dia?
dulu
Soalan
Saya-
saya kenapa bertambah? Kenapa diubah? Kenapa dinaikkan tu?
di
Ada
mana?
Tak tahu.
Sebab kalau saya baca ni
Hmm?
English law pada abad ke-7 dan 8 diorang menjadikan kanak-kanak pada usia 10 dan 11 baru dikenakan tindakan criminal penalties. Kalau Neil Postman. Okay, kalau Neil Postman pula, dia argue that umur 7 tahun diterima sebagai criminal responsible disebabkan pada masa pertengahan zaman membaca dan menulis adalah tidak not available at that time, okay, untuk untuk orang-orang pada zaman tu. So based on I baca umur 16 17 belum ada lagi. Kau boleh baca yang mana? Boleh bagi
Saya baca dalam slide tadi.
slide. Okay, saya ulang.
Saya tengok.
Tu saya yang buta saya salah tulis
Saya salah tengok. Ada tadi
Ha.
pasal 16 17. Tak silap.
Bukan?
Bukan?
Tidak.
10 11.
Ni John Sultan Divine anak dia bagi. So bukan ni. Bukan ni. Bukan?
Habis sudah. Ini yang
Empat Aiman kot. Dia tahu.
Aiman. Okay, kita tengok kita tengok satu-satu.
Tengok. Cuba tengok.
Ni memang tak ada. Ini memang tak ada lah. Aiman,
Ya, saya.
Sabar Man. Ni Aiman.
Okay.
Aiman.
Ni undang-undang kenakalan pertama kan. Lepas tu
Ya.
dia tetapkan umur 16
Okay.
tahun kan. Lepas tu dia dinaikkan kepada umur 17 untuk lelaki dan 18 untuk perempuan. Kenapa? Why?
Sebab salah satu sebab ya, umur 17 hingga 18 tu adalah salah satu umur remaja lagi. Faham tak?
Faham, tapi kenapa tidak sama? Itu saya punya persoalan.
Tidak sama sebab satu sebabnya adalah mereka mengira tempoh kematangan pada ketika itu boys and girls, tahap kematangan dia tu berbeza. That's why kita tengok dia tulis kat situ dia raise kan to 70 years old for boys and 18 years old for girls.
Okay, faham. Thank you.
Okay, harap tak ada soalan lain. Terima kasih.
Ada lagi soalan? Boleh je tanya Piper. Okay, jika tak ada kita tamatkan sesi. So we end our presentation. Thank you for lending your ears to hear our presentation in English. Oh, why? Very bad English, but we try it. Okay. Thank you. So we move to next presentation.